Good evening. I'm Matthew Ngolova.
And I'm Geraldine Sen.
This year, World Day for Safety and Health at Work and the World Day Against Child Labour are coming together in a joint campaign to improve the safety and health of young workers and end child labour. With us tonight to talk more about this, I have Mr. Nawal Kishore, Manager of Training, Accreditation, Chemical and Hygiene Unit, and Mr. Atish Kumar, the Director of Child Labour Standard Services. Good evening and thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Good evening.
Now, during the month of April, you were in the north and in the west on the campaign to improve safety and health for young workers and end child labour, of course. Could you tell me more about that?
Thank you. As you might know that this year with the Ministry of Employment, especially the National OHS Department, is celebrating the World Day for Safety and Health at Work. Yeah. And the theme for the day is OHS vulnerability for young workers. So what the ministry is trying to do, the ministry has got a tripartite setup towards this celebration, which also includes the International Labour Organization. And the ministry has formed a committee whereby they look at the celebration. We have had the celebration in the north last week, and also we'll be having the major celebrations in the Western Division, which is in Lautoka, on the 26th of April, followed by a national conference that will be held at Dipel, which has been jointly organized by the Fiji National University. So the purpose of this celebration is to just create awareness amongst the young workers on what are their roles and responsibilities as far as health and safety in the workplace is concerned, what type of working conditions are they exposed to, and what are some of the things that they need to adhere to as far as the legislative compliance is concerned on health and safety.
Who are the other stakeholders in this as well?
The other stakeholders, apart from the International Labour Organization, is the Fiji Employers Federation, Fiji Commerce and Employers Federation, and also the Fiji Trades Union Congress, who represent the employees of the country, plus the government representative, which is represented by some of the government departments, for example, Ministry of Works, Ministry of Health, Social Welfare Department, and the National OHS Service, which is the Ministry of Employment.
And what has the response been like in the communities that you visited?
We have had a session in Lambasa last week, and the turnout was enormous. We had about 100 participants for the World Day for Safety and Health celebrations. Yeah. We had a sort of a presentation where we had talked about how young workers are exploited in the workplace. This is a global issue, not only in Fiji. So we had targeted on young workers. We had targeted school children, the high-end school children who will be becoming workers in a year or two. And what are some of the things that might contribute to their ill health if they are exposed to some kind of hazardous work or some kind of dangerous activities. Because they are new, or they will be new workers, there is a probability that employers may exploit because of their age and their inexperience, not enough training, and some of them might leave school apart from vocational and then they turn up at the workplaces, and there could be chances where the employer may take advantage of these young and vulnerable workers. So the ministry is trying to create an awareness, provides training on how these things could be addressed, and also the support of the employer, because the most important part is the employer's contribution, because how they contribute to the health and safety at the general workplace.
Like from this campaign, what could you gather? What was the common type of child labour throughout the country?
Director Labour Assistant this year will talk about child labour, but just before we move on to that one, this campaign is also targeted at some of the government policies, for example, providing free education to children. Okay. And that contributes to students going to school. Prior to that, those policies, there were students who just drop out of the school and they are exposed to hazardous work environment. But one of those policies for the government now is to provide free education. So that closes the gap on students leaving early and opting to work in hazardous conditions. So some of those are government's policy, which contributes to the promotion of health and safety at work.
With the campaign that you had, what sort of publications, what sort of material were you using? Because I can understand with you trying to target mostly youths who are still in school or who would be leaving school soon to join the workforce. Maybe they're not quite as well versed with working conditions and the realities of such workplaces. What sort of materials were you using to sort of impart this knowledge to them?
Yeah, we had prepared a 2-3 hour presentation on what are the implications of youth employment, what are the benefits, what are the advantages and disadvantages, and how could the government assist in preparing for those young workers. Having said that, we at this point in time, there are a number of a lot of workplaces have got young workers. Some of them are inexperienced, some of them have just left school, some of them it's their bread and butter issues. So we have our presentation is our seminar was targeting the working conditions that they will be exposed to at the workplace, because they have not enough experience as far as work is concerned. The legislation, the Health and Safety at Work Act, provides all the guidelines for the duties of the employer, duties of the workers, duties of supervisors and managers. However, having said that, there are scenarios where some of these provisions are not followed by. And if you look at the workers' responsibility, like one of those responsibilities for workers is to notify hazards and workplace issues. If the employer does not provide a mechanism of solving health and safety problems in the workplace, regardless of whatever the issues the employees have, there is no mechanism for those employees, regardless of whether they are young or experienced workers. But there has to be a mechanism, a consultative mechanism within the workplace where they can collectively bring this thing, the issues of workplace health and safety, and then sort those issues.
What could the penalties be for something like that, for not having that in place?
Yeah, for non-compliance of health and safety, the maximum penalty is $100,000.
Okay.
And it depends on the type of the offense, the nature of the offense. There are some frequent offenders, but the maximum penalty is $100,000. We do not want to be a punishing agency where we just go and issue fines, but the ministry has got a training and promotion unit which which goes and disseminates information on health and safety. We also talk about HIV and AIDS. We also talk about workplace stress. So this is the purpose of the ministry's training and promotion unit, where we don't talk about. There is awareness sessions that we provide free of charge. Then we have got accredited training that we do, which comes at a cost. And then in those trainings and awareness sessions, after those trainings and awareness sessions, then the employer, the employee, including the supervisors and managers, they very well know what their specific responsibilities are. And the ministry does provide the consultancy services as well. If the employer has any issues in regards to, if there are certain issues that the employers cannot manage, if they cannot solve, then they can feel free to come and seek the assistance of the ministry.
Thank you for that. We'll just go to a quick break right now, and then we'll be back. You're watching For the Record. Good evening and welcome back. Geraldine, I believe you have a question?
Now, with the training that's been done in the North and of course in the West as well with the celebrations, you've mentioned that you're trying to educate young children, especially youths with working conditions. Then again, we must also consider that employers need to do their part as well. And looking at the workforce as it is, not all of these employers have major businesses. Some of them are small-time business owners, and that's where the exploitation starts. Are you doing any consultations with them, any trainings with them, any lead-ups, follow-ups on how the working conditions should be? And of course, later on, maybe you could touch on the types of child labor and of course the exploitation that occurs within those sort of situations.
Thank you. The health and safety legislation provides for all workplaces, regardless of the number of people that has been or that are employed at the workplaces. And we have got an enforcement team as well, which looks about which goes and enforces the legislation. Prior to that, we have, just like I had mentioned before, that we have the training unit. We identify, and there are certain trainings which the ministry provides free of charge to the stakeholders. In this case, the employers, the workers, and there are many companies who take part of this. We understand that there are small companies who may not be able to do it on their own, and the ministry just provide avenues for them. For example, they can combine together, they can group together, and they can ask for a awareness or a training or anything like this. At the same time, to ensure that the OHS, because now health and safety is a law of this country, so every worker of this country needs to know at least Health and Safety at Work Act 1996. So there are certain universities and tertiary institutions which have incorporated health and safety within their curriculum. so that by the time the students leave those tertiary institutions, they will have at least a little bit of background on what health and safety is about, what are their responsibilities, what they need to do, what are the things they need to address with the employers. And most importantly is that because they will be they will be very young starting work, and it is the opportune time for them to know what the working life has ahead of them and what are their requirements that they need to meet. And once it is developed, or once it is being in the curriculum of the institutions, then basically it talks about the basics of health and safety and what are the requirements. So the ministry is also liaising with the universities, tertiary institutions, and providing training and awareness. And I think there are a few universities which have incorporated health and safety as one of the units for their courses that they offer. And it's not a optional unit, but for example, if you are doing engineering, if you are doing any kind of courses that you want to take,
it's mandatory.
And it is a mandatory unit that requires. So as soon as, for example, if the students are in Form 6 and Form 7, by the time they reach these tertiary institutions, then one of those things that they will need to study is occupational health and safety, and dealing with health and safety workplaces. So, and then it can cascade down, and then it can go to lower school levels where from the beginning students will know what health and safety is all about.
Thank you for that. Now, with all of that, of course, you know, children and of course youth having some sort of background knowledge, still there's exploitation that does happen with children going to school with the free schooling initiative that's in place already. There are still children who are being exploited by family members, by of course friends and you know, guardians, and of course employers, where you see children standing out by the road selling coconuts or roti parcels late into the night. You also have children who are now being used in the school holidays as part-time workers, and they're being exploited, long hours and not enough rest. Would you like to add on to that?
Yes, thank you. I think the important point here is when you look at the issues of child labor. In Fiji, from 2008, when the Employment Relations Act came into place, we can see that we have defined the minimum age, and of course we have also Fiji has also ratified ILO Convention 138 that talks about minimum age. We have also ratified ILO Convention 182 that talks about worst forms of child labor, and those conventions are already embedded within the provisions of the law to ensure that we give the highest protection to our children. Now, when you look at the issues of child labor, from 2011 till 2018, we can see that the ministry has withdrawn a total of 200 children. These are, of course, children who are basically in terms of child labor, in terms of minor work which they were doing. But the important point here is that with government initiative in terms of re-education, we can see that the number of children that were actually in child labor has dramatically reduced. We can see that I think for the first 4 months of 2018, we have not received any child labor case. Of course, there are some issues that we are trying to investigate. There are some issues we are trying to ensure that we provide awareness to these, to the parents, and of course to the employers. What we can see is that when we talk about child labor is, of course, when a child is in employment. When a child is in employment, of course, during school hours. We do not want any child to be in employment during school hours. And of course, if any employer that employs a child during school hours, and of course there is harsher penalties for these employers. We do create awareness to these employers, and what we can see is that we have got great cooperation from these employers. We are from 2011 when we started the child labor project with the European Union, and of course with the ILO joint partnership program with Fiji Employers Federation, of course Fiji Trade Union Congress. We can see that we have created more awareness to the communities. We have gone right to the community level, and of course with the assistance of Ministry of Women and Children, we have signed in 2015 a interagency guideline that talks about how we are going to deal with child labor cases if that comes in. For example, if there is a child labor case in a remote area, we have got interagency committee set there that actually works with these with the government departments to ensure that these children are quickly withdrawn from child labor and returned to school. And with that in place, we have withdrawn a total of 200 of these children. They're now in school, they're doing well in school, and we have also kept in terms of with the Ministry of Education, we can see that we have followed up on these cases to ensure that these children don't come back into child labor. Now, in terms of the areas where children are allowed to be employed, those who are above 15 years, they can be employed, but that too during school holidays and after school. with the parents' consent or with the guardian's consent. Of course, there has to be a written consent by the parent and the guardian for the child to be actually employed with a particular employer. And if that happens, then of course the employer must pay the minimum rates of pay as per the particular industry. The employer must also ensure that the child returns to his or her guardian's or the parent's place after work. But no child can be employed after 10 p.m.
Thank you for that, sir. We'll just go to a quick break right now and then we'll be back. You're watching For the Record. Good evening and welcome back.
Now, given all that you've said about workplace conditions for children who will be in employment or will be offered employment opportunities, what about those who don't have formal employment? Not everyone will be going to, say, a business. Some might be involved with a family business. Some might be doing, you know, work for, say, a family member or something on a farm or something like that. What about those kind of conditions?
Yes.
How much rest do they need? How many hours can they work consecutively?
Thank you. I think when you look at family business, children can be employed, right? Can be employed after school and during school holidays. But it should not be, they should be employed in any hazardous work. For example, if a child is coming to his or her family farm, then of course the child cannot be involved in chemical spraying, or they cannot be involved in any dangerous work that can be cause injuries to the child or have an impact on the health and safety of the child.
Strenuous either.
Yes, of course. So a child can be employed with the assistance and under the observation of the parent or the guardian. The child can assist the family members. The child can assist in terms of ensuring that the child also learns, you know, those simple work which the child required to. But then, of course, it should not have any impact on the education of the child. For example, a child cannot be employed late at night when, of course, a child should be in bed. And, of course, the child should also complete his or her homework so that they can go to school the next day. So these are some of the things that we have actually ensured that the parents and the guardians. We also created awareness from 2011, of course, with our health and safety department, and also with other ministries, especially with the Ministry of Women and Children. We have been working closely with them to ensure that we go right to the grassroots level, we go right to the districts and division levels to ensure that parents and guardians are aware of these issues. They are aware of how important it is. And of course, we can see that when you look at 2013 Constitution says right to work and just minimum wage. That's very, very important to us. Of course, the Sustainable Development Goal in terms of Goal 8, which talks about inclusiveness and settlement economic growth. And the Fijian government, of course, the Honorable Minister for Employment in last year, 2017, you can say that in Buenos Aires, Argentina, on the 16th of November, the Minister has signed the 4th Global Conference Declaration on Eradication of Child Labor and Worst Forms of Child Labor. So the government is committed in terms of ensuring that we eradicate this problem of child labor. And of course, when you look at the 2017 and 18 budget, we have more than $900 million being allocated in terms of ensuring that we have quality education. So these are the initiative government has put in place to ensure that we don't have problem of child labor and we don't have problems where children are dropping out of school. So these are the initiative that is being put in place. And as government department, what we are trying to do is to ensure that we go down to each and every child. We go down to the districts level, we go down to the divisional level, we go down to the relevant Tikina levels, we go down to community level and advise them in terms of the importance of education, importance of youth development. You can see now that we are consulting more of our youths from 2011 in terms of ensuring that we have a better plans for child labor. We have been consulting our youths. We have been getting ideas from them. We've been talking to them, sitting down with them at the district and divisional levels. We're trying to ensure that we hear them, actually what they want. And of course, we bring it up to ensure that we have a better plan, we have a better policy in place so that we, at the end of the day, we are assisting these youths in terms of national development.
And I believe with what Geraldine has spoken about in cases involving family, that would fall under social welfare's jurisdiction. But one thing I wanted to talk on, young workers, of course, is something that I notice is that a lot of them, for jobs that they're doing, would require a skill base. They would have a skill, but most of them would have Form 6 or Form 7 pass, and they're doing things, doing jobs that is way above their skill. How do you go about in dealing with those sort of cases?
Yes, thank you. I think when you look at the National Employment Center of the Ministry, the National Employment Center registers those who are unemployed. And of course, there is a program in place with the National Employment Center to ensure that these workers acquire the required skills. We also have the technical schools, that is, we can say that that is actually assisting in terms of those children who are, in terms of who may want to engage in these technical schools, who want to enroll in these technical schools. And what we have seen is that with this introduction of the technical schools, we have also seen a lot of these children who are coming out and acquiring those technical skills. So these are the initiative that is put in place by government to ensure that we assist our youths, we assist our children in all areas so that we don't have problems later on where we have a case of child labor, where we have cases where the youths are actually unskilled. And of course, when you look at the National Employment Center, we have a lot of programs in place that is actually assisting with that. They're actually preparing people for employment.
And are a lot of youth accessing a net?
Yes, a lot of youths are actually coming in that trying to register through the National Employment Center. We have also seen that a lot of youths are actually now taking up the initiative of going aboard in terms of the seasonal work programs that we have, and we have seen that that with this in place, we have got a lot of positive results coming out from both our the employers in Australia and New Zealand. Our minister has just returned from a trip to Australia and New Zealand, and of course what we have seen is that a lot of these employers are praising the Fijian youths, the way we actually do work, the way we relate to our people, and of course the way we work in these farms. I have actually gone and of course seen that the way our youths are actually, a lot of these employers are actually praised, and a lot of these employers are actually ensuring that they want these Fijian youths who come in because they display one of the best attitudes in terms of work. And of course that is part of the plan that we have in place that is now bearing fruits.
How about with young people in terms of accidents at the workplace? What is some of the causes of them?
The legislation, the Health and Safety at Work Act, provides provisions in regards to reporting of accidents and incidents. There is also the Workmen's Compensation Act, which also provides all the avenues for reporting of accidents and incidents. So the legislation is very clear that all accidents and incidents must be reported within 24 hours. Within 48 hours, and then what normally does is when the ministry analyzes the reports, the accident reports, the ministry then decides to carry out investigation in regards to the accident. We do not investigate all the accidents. However, once we receive the report, the preliminary report of the accidents, the respective forms are filled, then the inspectorate analyzes those reports, and then wherever necessary, depending on the nature of the accident and the hazards, the exposure, these are some of the things, the severity of the risk, all of these things the ministry considers, and then we carry out the necessary investigation. And if there is a need, then upon our investigation, then we might be penalizing the employer or whatever. Having said that, the provision is there for penalty as well, as far as the non-reporting of accidents is concerned. So 48 hours is the time frame that the employers must report all accidents and near misses to the ministry, and the ministry has got its own procedures in regards to investigation of those incidents.
I definitely want to touch more on that shortly after this, but we'll go to a quick break right now and we'll be back. You're watching For the Record. Good evening and welcome back. Now, could you tell me more about the form and the way of reporting? If someone's watching right now who's been in an accident, nothing was happened, there was no form of reporting, how would they go about it if they wanted to do it now?
Yeah, thank you very much. The form that the employer is required to fill is the OHS F1 form, and there's another form, the OHS F2. So the F1 form has to reach the ministry within 48 hours of that accident, injury, disease or death.
That's by the employer?
It's the employer's responsibility to ensure that this reporting is done within 48 hours. At the same time, as part of the employer's responsibility, they also fill the OHS F2 form for that same accident, injury, disease or death, and they have to maintain it for their records as well. There are certain employers who do not meet these requirements. And if an employee feels that his injury or accident or whatever has not been reported within the appropriate time frame, then the employee can always call the ministry, can walk in and just advise the ministry of the nature of accident or disease or whatever accident that had taken place. And then the ministry will trace back from that report to go and deal with the employer as to why this accident or injury or disease was not reported. It's also very similar to workmen's compensation and their respective LD forms that are filled, and it is the responsibility of the employer to ensure that the forms are filled and submitted within those time frames. At the same time, because the health and safety in the workplace, there are committees and OHS representatives within the workplace. The employer, what they normally do is they assign people, for example, the human resource department, the health and safety chairpersons, the secretary, to report these accidents and near misses or deaths or diseases in the workplace. And it is the responsibility, because the OHS committee for any workplace has got the employer representative who directly report to the employer as far as health and safety in the workplace is concerned, and has also got worker representatives. So non-reporting of accidents shall not be an issue if you have the health and safety committee working in place. If the mechanism is, that's a consultative mechanism that we have, and one of those purposes is to formulate policies, investigate accidents, identify hazards, notify the relevant parties, relevant authorities. If the employer feels that there is a certain problems in the workplace which they cannot solve, they can always access the ministry's inspector, who will provide consultancy, provide training, awareness, and then also guide the employer on how to address these type of issues. But as far as reporting is concerned, I must remind that it is a requirement under law that all accidents, injury, and diseases and deaths are reported within the forms that I have just elaborated. The forms can be accessible through the ministry's website. If not, then you can just, we have got a safety line, and we have got the ministry's details, and the worker himself or herself can call directly and report those accidents.
Thank you. Now, with all of that being said, there's been an advisory committee that's been set up to deal with OHS issues, and this has, of course, been highlighted by the Minister of Employment himself. Could you tell us more about that? Yeah,
the advisory committee is the National Occupational Health and Safety Advisory Board, and the purpose of the board is to advise the Minister on OHS developments in the country. For example, if we need to develop a regulation, then we have to go through the National OHS Board, who will deliberate on the requirements. The tripartite is there, of course, the employer and the worker and the government is there as well. So all of those policies and requirements are tabled through the board, and it is then provided to the minister, and then it is taken to Parliament, where these things are debated and all of those things. Now, in this scenario, the tripartite plays a very important part. That is the consultative mechanism that the government is trying to establish. The employers, the workers, and their job is to, and then we have got within the National OHS Advisory Board, we have the subcommittees who specifically deal on different policies that the National OHS Service wants to implement.
Just for clarification, this workers' compensation is only valid for those who are above 19 or 18 years old? If it's a child, they would not be compensated if they are working?
No, if you are a worker, then workmen's compensation does cover all of
registered
the workers.
Worker.
Yeah, the workmen's compensation does cover. And for the OHSF form, F1 form that I'm talking about, it does not talk about any age limit. It does not talk about age limit. If you are injured at the workplace, it has to be reported. And the employer should not deliberate on whether it's a minor accident or it is a major accident. If there is an accident, or even if it is a near miss, it has to be recorded with those forms. It's a requirement under the legislation, under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1996.
And would the penalties be the same under the, of course, in terms of employment? If it's a child, would they have separate penalties?
Yes. I think when you look at employment of children, the very important point here is if a child is in employment, and if there is any injury to the child, definitely there will be, if the doctor proves that, of course, there is this child, there is a percentage of incapacity or anything, of course, the child will be compensated. When you look at in terms of the employment of children where the employer has actually breached certain regulations, when you look at employer may not have employed a child who is above 15 years, and of course the Employment Relations Act provides for these penalties. Of course, when you look at the general penalty, it says for an individual the fine is up to $10,000 or 2 years imprisonment, or for a corporation the fine is up to $50,000. So when you look at the employment of children, there are certain guidelines which the employer must have. One of them, of course, is, as I have alluded, is about the parental consent. Then of course the employer should not expose the child into any hazardous work area.
Okay.
We also have in Fiji the hazardous workplace list that talks about what children can do, what children cannot do. For example, in terms of chemical spraying, for example, in terms of using of farm machineries, which of course can be hazardous to the child, which can be dangerous to the child, of course, children cannot do. So these are certain guidelines, and of course these are the regulations in place which the employer must know before they expose the child into those areas of employment. So when we talk about child labor, it's basically in terms of those work which children can do after school, which is not injurious to their health, which will not affect them in terms of their health and safety. Of course, helping their families in their farm, or for example, helping their family members in their shop, or for example, helping their parents, while actually they are trying to like do some certain farm work. Of course, they can. But there are conditions. Now, the important thing here is to ensure that with government's initiative of free education, we want every child to be in school.
Okay.
We do not want any child to be in child labor. During school hours, it's just unknown.
Yeah.
And of course, when we look at the labor inspections, the ministry's labor inspectors, we go and conduct workplace inspections just to ensure that the conditions are met. And of course, we also don't have any child labor. Any employer that employs children during school hours, of course, there are serious penalties, which of course the employer will have to face serious consequences if they employ children during school hours.
Thank you for that, sir. We'll just go to a quick break right now, and then we'll be back. You're watching For the Record. Good evening and welcome back. Could you tell me more about the campaign and what you did?
Thank you. For the celebrations to mark the World Day for Safety and Health, we have had the celebrations in the Northern Division. We started off in the Northern Division, which was on the 20th of April, where we had invited all our stakeholders, including schools and all the relevant industries, to come and participate in this awareness campaign in regards to young workers. Moving forward, we will have the major celebrations in Lautoka on the 26th of April, where the Honourable Minister will be the chief guest for this. Other invited guests will be the International Labour Organization. Of course, they are a major player in these celebrations. The Fiji Employees Federation, the Fiji Trades Union Congress, government departments, and all the relevant industry-wide stakeholders within the Western Division. So for the programs, what we have tried to do is we have to put up some oratory contests for young workers from the industries, students from the vocational and tertiary institutions, where they will come and talk about what they feel could be a impact of their working time in future, or how they could be exploited in regards to that. So the ministry is gearing towards that celebration. And we have applied for we'll be doing a march, and that march will lead the program for the day. We have also invited all the relevant stakeholders to come and participate and come and support. There will also be some panel discussions in regards to health and safety. If the employers, if the workers, if any party does have any issues in regards to health and safety, that is where they can come and meet the ministry inspectorate and the senior executive managers and trainers, where they can discuss freely on the implications of health and safety at workplace. So this is a whole day program which will be officiated in the Western Division. This year we have decided to move to the West. The major celebrations, in the past years, the major celebrations used to be in the Central Division. We know that Western Division also plays a very critical part as far as the economy is concerned. So we want to move the celebrations for the people in the Western Division, and then probably in years to come, then we might move to outer islands and in the northern division, just to create awareness in regards to the health and safety at work. And the theme, because it talks about young workers, we are targeting young workers from the universities to come and share their experience. They might come and talk about how they started their employment, what are the things they had gone through. They might also find some of the provisions that they might not know, which might have impacted on their employment. So these are some of the things that we talk about. So the consultation will be there, and the tripartite partners will be there. And the ministry's main purpose for this is just to share information and share thoughts and ideas to improve the general workplace conditions for all the workers in this country.
Thank you for that. Now, with things like the school holidays, public holidays, some kids will be involved in, doing some family, of course, jobs. What would your advice be?
Yes, thank you. I think currently we're in school holiday. Of course, we also like to advise our children and also our youths. They're very important in terms of the economic development of this nation. And of course, when you look at the youth development, when you look at the issues that we have in terms of child labor, we always try to consult our youths. We always try to consult and ensure that we have the best policies in place for our youths and of course for our children. And with that in place, we have seen that our inspectors are already on the ground to ensure that if any child is in employment, of course, they must be provide the best conditions for the children. If, in case, for example, our child is in employment, there is a parental and guardian's consent where the child can work, and of course, the child can only work for the first 4 hours, and then they must have 30 minutes paid break before they engage into another 4 hours employment. But no child can be employed after 10 p.m., no child can be employed in hazardous work, and no child can be employed without the consent of the parent or the guardian. And of course, we are advising employers, if they are employing children, they must pay the minimum rates of pay for the children, and of course they meet the conditions. If there is any problem, of course, employers can always consult the ministry, the relevant district labor offices around Fiji, Ministry of Employment Office, and also they can call the ministry, of course our headquarters here in Suva, and of course the district and division, to ensure that they meet the conditions before they employ any child. But what we request is, if any child is in employment, the employer must check the birth certificate. That's very, very important, to ensure that the child is above 15 years of age. And of course, what we request these children is, of course, our youth is to ensure that they use the best time. Of course, the school holiday, they must ensure that, of course, they are with their parents and their guardians. And of course, if they really want to work, if there is a consent from the parents, then of course they can work on light work and not any hazardous work.
Thank you for that, and thank you for coming tonight to talk more about your campaign and all that you'll be doing. If you'd like to know more about safety and health at the workplace, you can visit them on their website, www.employment.gov.fj. However, that's it for tonight, and we do hope that you enjoyed the show. From Geraldine, the team, and myself, good night.